Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 402 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. It's 9 a.m. and I'm already boiling here.
Yeah, it's been a hot weekend in New York too. I think it's hot all over. A good old global warming, I guess, making everything warm. Krim, how hot is it in your part of California? Are you guys close enough that your weather is basically the same? Is that kind of how it works?
No, Krim's much hotter.
No, yeah. Oh wait, hold on. Global warming's real? I'm just kidding. I think that it's even hotter this weekend just because, yeah, like in my area it's a little bit colder, but yeah, it's very hot down here. And on top of that, this past weekend, I think it was hot enough to where a random part of my apartment complex caught on fire.
Because it was so hot outside, it just spontaneously combusted. Yeah, that's actually really scary.
I don't know that's weather related. That just might be maintenance related.
That who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't think apartments are supposed to do that, but I'm glad you're okay and survived the spontaneous combustion. Anyway, podcast-wise today, we're jumping around a bit. Commander Masters, we got the full main set since last week, so we're going to be talking about that. We also just got our first Commander precon, so maybe we'll touch on that a little bit as well. Explore Anthologies coming out this week. There's been some feedback from the community I want to ask you guys about. Nazguls is a big topic of conversation, a little conspiracy theory there. We want to see how we would rebalance a few cards that are all over the place on Magic Arena, and then talk a bit about Standard before answering fish mail. So that's the main plan for today. Before we jump into it, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit lets you skip all the time and typing and work that go into buy listing. You can use their curated service and send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a little work on your end, you can use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. And no matter which one you choose, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off if you head over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic, and let's start with what I think is the biggest news of the week, Commander Masters. So since last week, we got literally the full set, and it is a big one. There's like 400 some cards in this set, over 100 rares in this set. What is your gut reaction now that we've seen this entire set? So, okay, to set the stage, we know this is master set price. Like, draft boxes 300, set boxes 375, collector boosters going $60 a pack or something. So it's priced like a premium, very expensive master product. Now that we've seen the set, how do we feel about it? Is it worth picking up even at master set prices?
It's pricey.
It is pricey.
I mean, you're asking the wrong dude, because I have always believed that I just would get singles, right? Like, I don't even buy packs to open normally, like non-master sets, right? Like, if I get it, it's, maybe because it's a gift or something like that, then sure. But I never actively seek out buying boxes. I just buy singles.
I mean, that is normally the right thing for most players to do. So that is a wise technique. What do you think, Richard?
Can we afford to buy boxes anymore? Can you afford to fork over $300 or $500 for some RNG? I feel the prices are so crazy that it's not even if the EV was worth it, the EV was worth it. That's not right? That's average, right? You're opening one box, you don't know what it's gonna be. You got to sell the cards, you got to put in the hours, or you could use Card Conduit, but you got to actually still do it. And then you take a shaving off that. Is it worth it? Probably not. It never was. But now with these prices, does that mean this was a bad set? Not really, because someone else will open it and you just buy the singles, right? So at the end of the day, some stuff got reprinted. You want a Jewel Lotus? Well, it's coming down in price. You want a Doubling Season? It's coming down in price, right? So I don't know about buying boxes, but I mean, it certainly helps that some of these staples are being reprinted and you can pick them up for a cheaper price.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that is the best news about this set. So on one hand, I would agree. I would expect in EV, they've made it so complicated to calculate these days with so many special versions and things here and there that it's really hard to do it properly. But my guess is the EV of the set, if you just actually math it out, would actually be positive. I think just looking at the value of the high-end cards, it would be positive. So that means people will open these boxes. It might not be you or me. It might be vendors or finance types or whatever. But I think the value's there. The problem is, as you mentioned, Richard, the RNG is really high. There's a lot of variance. If you look at the rares in specific, there's some really valuable rares. They reprinted the whole Commander 2020 free spell cycle. It's really expensive. Cyclonic Rift, Personal Tutor, the medallions. There's a lot of really good cards there. There's also a lot of bulk rares. There's a lot of boom piles and azamis and, you know, just these inspiring statuary, these like 50-cent rares, which would make me very nervous about opening a box. Unlike Grim, I love opening booster packs. Like, it's one of my favorite things to do. And I think I am also in the buy singles camp. I don't think that makes it a bad set. As you said, we've already seen the prices on a lot of these cards, even at pre-sales, like stuff like Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat. They're already selling for like half of what they were before. So it is doing its job of bringing down prices and doing it really well. But I think I'd rather let someone else experience the variance. I will say one of the things I like most about this set, so there's been a little bit of complaining. Smothering Tithe got a reprint, but it got bumped up to Mythic for the first time, which is a little awkward. One of the things I like about this set, though, is they actually dropped a lot of cards from Mythic to Rare. So that was a sneaky way for them to print more like really bomby creatures like Zakamas and some like popular big dinosaurs, Maelstrom Wanderers, and get them in the set without having them in the rare slot. And that should really help get the prices of those cards down. There's a big difference between being reprinted at Mythic in just the amount of supply of those cards that's coming out and being reprinted at Rare in a set like this. So it really should help bring the prices down on these cards. So I think this, if you just look at the most in-demand Commander cards, what's missing from this set? There's really not a lot, is there? Like, I think Mana Crypt is probably the big one. That's the one, like, super expensive, super chase Commander card that could have been in the set that wasn't in the set. Otherwise, I'm actually really happy with how this set turned out as far as what they chose to put in it. I just don't want to risk opening a bunch of bulk rares in a $400 box or whatever.
That's the Magic players speaking, Seth. So have you noticed, if you looked at your Commander Clash decks, if you build a deck containing like staples in any form, your deck is $1,000, right? Like your mana base is like hundreds of dollars. You put in like it's a Fairies Pro, a Fierce Guardianship, like your deck is $1,000. They could have did all this and just made it like a normal set, right? Like the price of the packs could be, you know, not 2x, but just normal. Right? We could have $100 boxes and they could jam all these in, which is what I think they actually should do, right? They should actually put a premium on the new cards, and then the reprints, they should actually, you know, make cheap, right? Like, you know, we've seen these cards a million times over. Like, I don't know why I got to pay a premium for them, but when they release the next greatest Gandalf, Frodo hybrid card, whatever, like, yeah, I'll pay more money for that. That's a brand new card, right? So I actually kind of think it's kind of bad. And then the fact that they have to upshift Smothering Tithe. Like, they couldn't just give us the Smothering Tithe that's rare. Like, you needed to min-max this out, Wizards. Like why, right? Like, what is your justification? Like, oh, draft will be broken? Yeah, okay, guys. Like, I don't know. Like, there's some things they do just, like, I think don't actually matter, but give us, like, a bad taste. And I think just, like, upshifting that Smothering Tithe, like, did it really matter to your bottom line? Like, why did you have to do that, right? So
yeah, it just gives the community something to like complain about and meme on. And I think the difference is so minimal in Wizards' bottom line. Like, that was the one card. Like, if they didn't do that with that one card, no one would have that to complain about. But instead, the one Smothering Tithe being upshifted to Mythic overshadows the like 15 Mythics that were downshifted to Rare because everyone's focused on the Smothering Tithe. So yeah, I think that was a miss from Watsy's part. Krim, we were talking off cast, like, other games reprint things a little differently, right? Didn't you just pick up some like super reprinty like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, something, one non-Magic game? Like, how does it work in other games, Grim?
It's an X-Men. It's an X-Men.
Yeah, that's all X-Men.
Yeah, like Yu-Gi-Oh just did their 25th anniversary re-releases, and so they released like the first like 6 sets of their game. They're all about $70, which a box, by the way. And yeah, like they re-added some sweet foils in there, and like what a price difference I guess. What a price difference.
Better than $1,000 packs.
Celebrating
our illustrious history.
Are they also tournament legal? Like, so this would be the equivalent of the 30th anniversary edition, but for $70 in tournament legal? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I might have to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, we'll see about that.
All those cards with power crept out of the game, though.
I mean,
that's the Yu-Gi-Oh downside, right?
But I mean, like, so same with like 30th anniversary, technically, right? Almost everything in there is power crept out except for like duels. But yeah, like, I mean, it's just opening. Their marketing tool was nostalgia, right? And it worked. It worked. They suckered me. They got me good. These cards are probably nowhere near playable in the current year.
Yeah, definitely a different technique, I would say, for handling reprints. So that's Commander Masters. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, but I think I'm focused on the good news, which is prices of cards going down. Obviously, could always go down more. They could reprint it in a cheaper product to make the prices crash even lower, and that would be awesome for players. WotC, I don't think really wants to do that. They like some cards being expensive to sell future sets, but I think the big takeaway is a lot of really playable cards are already way cheaper than they were and should continue to get cheaper for the next few months. One last little word of warning, though. With Commander staples in specific, these cards are going to go back up. Like, you might have 6 months or something to snag these cards at a cheap price, but the Smothering Ties and Crater Hoofs and Demonic Tutors and Dragons, Great Henges, these are cards that get reprinted, they come down, and then they just shoot right back up to where they were before. So don't expect this to keep the cards cheap for the next few years. If you do want to pick them up, I would focus like this summer, this fall, before prices start to rise again. But anyway, let's.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
What, like,
I sauntered over to MDG Finance last week, and there was a thread lamenting about how Wizards has run out of reprint equity, based on the fact that there were no cards over $100 in this. What is your take on that? Is that a valid thing we should be looking at, like cards over 100, and what cards in the past have been over $100 in these master sets?
I mean, wasn't Jeweled Lotus like almost 100?
Jeweled
Lotus
Lotus
new card at that point, right?
Well, Jeweled Lotus being reprinted, I think, was just it was just under 100. It was close. Actually, the Commander Legends version, I guess it was a little bit under 100 when they actually announced the reprint. It was like 70 or 80. So yeah, I mean, I guess you have like
with the Fierce Guardianship, right? Like the free
Fierce
spell
Guardianship. I think topped out in the mid 60s. It might have touched 70. I guess you have like Capture of Xinghao and Sun Quan, like the portal stuff. Not that really counts because its price is mostly because it's just so scarce. I would say, I think that $100 is an arbitrary metric. Maybe it matters like psychologically because it's a pretty round, nice round number that sticks in people's heads. But the difference between a $80 Jewel Lotus and $110 Mana Crypt or whatever is like pretty minimal in terms of actual value. I think that running out of reprint equity is actually not much of a concern. I'm just looking at like standard right now, and it seems like Wizards is doing a pretty good job of printing new cards that are expensive that are going to need to be reprinted. Like, I'm just thinking like Shieldred is like $70. Elish Norn's like $30. Meathook Massacre is still $40. Beseju, the channel lands are pretty expensive. In the Lord of the Rings set, you got Orcish Bowmasters, you got the One Ring could already be reprinted. So I don't think it's actually a real concern at this point. I think Wizards has figured out how to print new cards in a way that makes them expensive enough that in a few years they're going to need to be reprinted. So I think that they have reached a sustainable level. And I think from the player's perspective, it would be good if they ran out of expensive cards to reprint, because that means all the really good cards are cheap. So that's more of a like finance concern anyway than a player's concern, because I think if you talk to players, most people would be happy if the most expensive card was $20. Like, sure, your Masters packs are not going to be as good, but what do you care if you're getting $20 Mana Crypt? So I don't even know if that's a bad thing anyway for players. It would be bad for Wizards to run out of reprint equity, but I don't think that's actually a negative for just the average casual player who isn't trying to like, invest in Magic cards or build, a stock portfolio out of their cardboard. So I'm not worried about it. I'm curious though. Let's move on. Any other modern? I'm so used to Modern Masters. Any more Commander Masters thoughts before we move on to some Explorer? So, okay. last week we talked about the new anthologies that are dropping on Arena this week. When we talked about them, there were still some cards missing. I think there were 10 Explorer cards, 5 Historic cards. We got all of them now. The general consensus is the Historic Anthology, really, really good. They kind of just hit it out of the park. Lots of cards people are hyped for. On the other hand, if you believe Reddit or social media, there's several posts about how the Explorer Anthology is the worst anthology that has ever been made, to the point where Wizards actually, there was a post on Reddit with them addressing it and talking about how we have other concerns. Like, yes, we're trying to bring Pioneer to Arena, but you got to remember we're making cards for all kinds of players, not just Explorer players. We'll talk more about it at Gen Con or whatever is coming up, Comic-Con, whatever event it is. I'm curious, Grim, is the anger over this anthology deserve? Like, does this deserve the reputation of being the worst anthology ever? Is it really that bad? Or is this just, Magic players being a little hyperbolic on the internet?
I mean, like, let's not lie here. This anthologies, at least on the Explorer half, has a bunch of dated cards, and there's like no real reason to add them, right? Like, they're like, it doesn't do anything for anybody. I'm sure there's somebody that's very happy about a Quarter Shield, but like, like Historic Brawl and all of that, right? Like, sure, but like, I don't know. I didn't. This Explorer, I was really hyped, and I just feel like once I actually saw the cards come out, I think it kind of deserves the tag of probably the weakest entry into the Explorer Anthology, right? Like what cards are played? Like actually played, not like we're not talking like from like years ago. I don't think there's much. Like, why those lands?
I mean, so
nostalgia,
I'll give
Krim. Nostalgia.
Judge
is familiar. You don't want to get people with that.
Yeah.
You play your charms. You can play your charms, your voice, your Deathrite Shaman.
God,
Is it not nostalgia? Like, these are kind of old cards that were good in their heyday, except for Quarter Shield. And then here they are, and hope you play with them in Historic Brawl.
Like the charms were good, right? Like, I think the charms are great. Specifically, really just Izzet charm, but like, what else was good from this? Like Court of Calling, sure. Psych Rift, Commander All-Star, terrible in 1v1.
Court of Calling, like,
yeah,
that was a really good card at one point, and I'll give Wizards a bit of a pass for Xenagos Worldspine Worm, because my guess is when they were actually choosing what cards to put in this, it was probably when those cards were seeing a lot of playing creativity, so maybe they just got a little wrecked by metagame shifts with those two. The charms, I actually think are...
Obsidat?
I'm not going to complain about Obsidat just because I love Obsidat.
Oh,
yeah.
Come on.
Blink.
Come on. Also, ain't nobody nostalgic for that or those lands. Come on.
Well, those lands are just budget lands.
They're even rare. They're like still rare.
Actually, they should have downshifted them or something. But
yeah, that would have made me hype for them. Like, do that, give them the snarl treatment, make them uncommons instead of rares.
Port Town was uncommon, right? Or he got downshifted, right?
Yep.
So, like, why the hell is this still rare? I don't know. I mean, yeah, like, if I look at all these, how much closer are we to even Pioneer now, right? Like, it's like not at all. Give her.
Very minimal.
Their message was literally telling you the exact opposite, right? They're like, these are cards for all players. Like, I thought this was Explorer Anthology, but no, it's a Commander product, right? Like, literally, they just told you in their response that they're making it for different types of players, i.e., like, not Explorer players. We are gonna take the full 5 years to get there, right? They are taking a lot of detours and pit stops, packing Historic Brawl cards and whatnot into here. So this actually just straight up told us.
This is the filler arc of like every anime.
We gotta fast forward it. We gotta read the guide to know which episodes to skip.
I just don't understand why they would. But like, if you're gonna make it for Commander or whatever Historic Brawl, put that into the historic side. Make your your historic whatever anthologies bigger. And put it into that side, and then actually just put things that are played for Explorer.
So yeah, I would say I had two comments. One is, I think part of the problem is the community's expectation is a lot different than Wizards' goal for these products. Like, the community wants Explorer Anthologies to be getting Pioneer on Arena as quickly as possible. Wizards, we might not like it, but they have been upfront about the fact that their time frame is like years in the future. They've said that from the beginning. Like, we're doing it, but it's going to take us several years, I think was the exact quote. And this is just the next step on that path. So I think that's where the actual issue is. The community wants Pioneer as quickly as possible. Wizards wants Pioneer 5 years from now as they sell a bunch of anthologies and do a bunch of remastered sets. So I think that that's like the heart of the matter. I don't think it's unfair for players to feel like this is a very useless Explorer anthology if your goal is to have Pioneer on Arena, because it is. Like, it's not doing much to actually put Pioneer on Arena. But I also think that from Wizards' perspective, like, they're doing kind of what they told us they were going to do, which is the super slow drip. Don't expect Pioneer anytime soon. So from that perspective, I guess I'm kind of like, I don't know. Like, I've seen some people be like, I'm quitting Arena over this Explorer anthology. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I get it. It sucks. But like, what really, like, they kind of warned us it was going to be like this. And if you look at past Explorer anthologies, it's not like all the cards are bangers. Like, there's some good cards. I think the biggest issue, my second point, was every other Explorer anthology, it had like 2 really good important cards, 2 or 3 really good important cards that let us kind of forget about all the horrible cards that they also added, like all the Tainted Remedies and Alicias that no one actually plays, Battle-Wise Hoplites. There would be a Elvish Mystic, which is like format defining, a Supreme Verdict, like super important card for Blue-White Control. The last Explorer anthology, people thought that was the worst Explorer anthology, but then on the last day there was Nykthos and Mutavault, and that sort of like changed the entire conversation because those 2 cards are so impactful. I think the problem with this one is we don't have those 2 cards. There's no Nykthos. There's no Mutavault. There's no Elvish Mystic. Like, there's no big chase card that, okay, like, yeah, there's a lot of chaff. There's a lot of, historic brawl stuff. But at least I got these 2 cards that really push the format forward. So hopefully Wizards learns from that in the future. Like, I think they can get away with printing like 20 cards for historic brawl if the other 5 cards are like the big format defining cards.
I thought they were
Pioneer.
Delve. I thought we were getting Delve.
I mean, that would have changed the conversation. Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time would have changed the entire conversation, even if the rest of the cards were the same.
I think the timeline arguments are fair from the community, because when we hear, let's say 3 years, 5 years, we're thinking, oh my God, it's so much work. The interns are slaving away and they're doing their best. It's just going to take 3 years, right? I'm like, okay, I'll cut them some slack. But they're just making random cards, right? Like, they actually are not working at full speed. Or the other way to think about it is, maybe we can get close to Pioneer within 1 year, and then it takes them 2 years to like actually fill out the long tail. Your tier 2 or tier 3 deck might be missing because no one plays those cards, and they'll get to them eventually within 3 years. But within a year, we'll have, the top 95 or 99% of the cards. Like, that's another way you could have hopiumed this, right? But the answer is we spent our resources making a quarter shield, right? Like, that's like, what's the play rate of this card? Like, you just spent all this time coding it and no one will play it. Like, why are we wasting time, right? So I think the criticisms are fair, even given like the long time frame Wizards presented, right? Because there's many ways we could have reached that are, I guess, more favorable for current players.
Yeah, I don't think that the criticism's unfair. I just don't think we should be surprised by it, because if you look at past anthologies and Wizards, like what they've said about the format, the whole like surprise Pikachu phase when there was a bad anthology, I'm like, isn't this normal? Like, shouldn't we be used to this by now?
How are they going to make it in 5 years, Seth? Like, they're not going to make it in 5 years at this rate. Like, how is it actually going to happen?
They did say in their response to people complaining about this that there'll be more cards for Explorer released the end of this year, the beginning of next year. So give them another 6 to 9 months, and we'll get some more cards for the format.
Let's lose what little players we have remaining. Okay, let's lose them to every other game, and then we'll release the cards.
All right.
I will say though that the historic side, outside of like Echoing Decay, which should have just been Vile Blight, like this, the historic side was really good. I thought that was a fun one. Getting to see Sword of Fire and Ice, Bloodbraid, the Titans, pretty cool Bloodghast, like Vendilion Click, Unearth. These are like even down to like the Fiery Islets and all of that. The Canopy Lance.
I
That
honestly
was a banger.
I honestly think that it's so funny. I think the Explorer Anthology is probably the worst anthology they've ever made. And I think Historic Anthology 7 might actually be the best out of any anthology they've made so far. Like, it's really, really good. Like, the lands are good. It's got a bunch of cards that'll see competitive play. It's got a bunch of nostalgic cards. So I think they really, it's just so funny that they managed to like hit one like so far out of the park and the other one is like just a bunt foul ball. Like, it's amazing how the difference between those two anthologies.
What about the conspiracy theory is that this is Wizards showing their hand that they don't want anyone playing Explorer, that they're pushing everyone into Historic because Historic is actually the arena format. And like, how can you make such a brilliant product and then such a piece of a doo-doo beside it? Like, you know, like someone must have looked at it and be like, hey, you know, one is great, one is not. What's going on, right? Like, how can you explain that one?
I mean, that's because these cards are, I think they're iconic, right? So like, it's easier to like, in a format where everything's legal, I think it's kind of obvious, right? Like kind of easy that you could just reprint some of these and people will be happy. Although I guess same with Pioneer, because you already know what people want.
So maybe this is just like tinfoil hat stuff, but is that even untrue? Like, I would say if you look at Arena holistically, the choices about how the client's designed, which formats are supported, not supported, it seems like the goal is to funnel people into the digital first formats. Like, they really design sets and cards and the client itself in a way that tries to get people to play Alchemy and Historic and minimizes the impact of formats like Explorer and even, I would argue, to some extent, Standard at this point. So I don't know, like, is that just a fact at this point that Wizards would prefer us to play Historic and Alchemy and cards with digital first formats if they had the choice? Like, to me, that seems true.
Right? Like, I mean, it makes sense. Why wouldn't you? It's your digital format on your digital client. Sure.
They can sell more cards. They can rebalance stuff. They can keep stuff fresh. Like, in theory, like, I don't know. Like, I think that probably is true that that's what Wizards wants.
Yeah.
I'll also say that
first. I think it's no format. Historic is basically no format, right? Like, every card is legal, and that's where Lord of the Rings can go, right? That's where, you know, whatever commander product they want to put on Arena can just randomly go for fun. So it's more of like the no format that's winning than like Explorer, which is like very rigid. Because like Lord of the Rings is where all the new players went, right? And then I'm sure we'll get another Lord of the Rings type set, which will come onto Arena in this fashion, and then Historic is where you're going to play it. So I think, Historic is actually where Wizards wants to go, either deliberately or not. Like, it's kind of just where it has to be, right?
It's also like the most fun format. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a lot of fun.
This is actually absolutely perfect segue. I have also really been enjoying Historic lately. We've talked about this a little bit before. I don't feel like Wizards is living up to their original vision for the digital first formats of having like fast rebalancings and changes. Like, I think that's something that they could really do a lot better of. So I have really been enjoying Historic ever since Lord of the Rings came out. But there are certain cards that when I see them, I'm like, wow, the format would be so much better if you would fix these cards, rebalance these cards, ban these cards. I don't care how you want you do it, but like, do something with them. And there was actually a Reddit post recently about four specific cards, but I only care about three of them. Three cards that see a lot of play in Historic or in Alchemy to some extent. And the person was trying to rebalance them, because in Historic, we don't ban cards, we rebalance them. And I was actually very curious, if you were in charge of Arena and you had the ability to rebalance these cards, how do you fix them? Like, what would you do with these cards? So card number 1, this is a big one, Krim. I know you know this card. I know this card. We thought it should be rebalanced forever. Crucius, Titan of the Waves. This is one of the digital only cards. It's current text, if you don't know this card. 3 mana legendary human pirate. At the beginning of your end step, you can discard a card. If you do, you make a treasure token and you choose Ambitious or Expedient. If you choose Ambitious, you seek a card with greater mana value than the one you discarded. If you choose Expedient, you seek a card with lesser mana value. So essentially, end step, discard a card. You get a card that's either lower or higher mana value and a treasure token based on what you discard. This card is... it's dominant in Historic and also in Alchemy. Krim, I think we all agree this needs to be rebalanced. How would you rebalance this, though? Like, what does a fixed Crucius look like?
They need to stop generating treasures. If there are, like, why does it generate a treasure? Like, on top of, I get it, it's a pirate, but like, it's already, like, the looting is built in, but why are they getting a treasure? They should also make it like I think they should be like 4 mana, at least. This should go up in mana and no treasure.
The treasure's really busted. The treasure allows for a lot of like tap out, play Crucius, discard a card, make a treasure, get a fatal push, use a fatal push to trigger revolt, fatal push your big thing, keep my Crucius. Like, it allows for some really, really strong lines. What do you think about just it doesn't trigger until your next upkeep? Would that be enough? Like, it doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play. You get 1 turn to kill it, and then it starts snowballing.
I mean, I think that'd be the way to go if you're gonna do it. You wait till their upkeep, but then people who are playing Crucius now will probably feel like they wasted their wild cards, right? Because that's an entirely different creature. I feel like if they wait till their upkeep, I think this card just probably doesn't get played, right?
What do you think, Richard?
So Seek is get from your deck, right?
Yeah, it's basically draw a card, except it's controlled, to some extent.
So it's a random card from your deck meeting the requirement?
Yes, random card from your deck meeting the requirement.
So the funny thing is, so Seth linked a Reddit post. I read the card. It was actually the person's fixed version missing the treasure part, and I'm like, this card is like so broken. So even if you remove the treasure part, it's still really good. I would fix it by making you have to hit in combat with Crucius, and then you get the trigger. Remove the treasure part and make you actually connect. But I think even if you wait till upkeep, it's still pretty good, right? Like, remove it now or you lose the game, right? Yeah. Like, essentially, like that's pretty good, right? So I think you make Crucius have to get in combat, and then you get the stuff. And then I think you can even keep the treasure part. Like, if you can get him through combat, then you get the treasure and you get the card.
Getting him into combat makes it even worse than waiting an upkeep, though.
That would be the most.
But you actually have some upside, and you actually have some playability to it. So I would keep the treasure and keep the card, but just make him hit in combat or player damage, not
that would be
crap.
that would be interesting. Yeah, they got to do something with this card, though, right? Yeah. Like, I think we're all in agreement that this is like number one.
Like, do you want to nerf it? So here's the question: when you nerf something, do you want to nerf it so that it's still a tier 1 card and played in every deck, just not as oppressive? Do you want to nerf it so that it's only played in like a single deck, or do you want to nerf it so it's never seen ever again?
So
they definitely probably want to just nerf it so that it's played, but like in a few decks.
But then it needs a synergy. There's no synergy to it, right? Like, what is one deck that would play this and another deck that would not?
I guess that's fair. Like, I mean, it lives up to the Jund and the Rakdos mentality of just good cards, right?
It's a Jund card, right? So then you just gotta nerf it into the ground.
I think, like, in my dream world, I would want them to print a really strong card like Crucius, have it be at the top of the meta for a while, and then nerf it to the extent that it's a fringe card and no longer part of the meta. The problem with this is Wizards can't or won't refund for nerfs, and that's the like conversation that's like floating over the top of all of this, because it makes players really upset when you spend a mythic wild card on something like Crucius, or 4 of them for a playset of Crucius, and then that card becomes no good. In my dream world, they would have a system similar to Hearthstone, where like if they nerf something, they give you the option. Like, you can trade this in for a mythic wild card. If you do, you will no longer have access to Crucius, so you would have to spend wild cards again to get the new version of it. So it's not just like free cards, which Wizards would never go for. But that would be my ideal solution. Make it so you could, get a wild card if your card gets nerfed, but then have the ability to really power down a card like this. Let it have its time in the sun, and then just like get rid of it altogether if you want to, once people get sick of it. Well, let's move on to Another new one. This is not a digital only card. This is a card that's all over the place. We've talked about whether or not this card should be banned, but bannings aren't a thing in Historic. The One Ring. How do you rebalance the One Ring to make it a fairly powered card in Historic? This one might be a little bit in the future. I don't know how quickly Wizards will take action on it, but I do think eventually this will be a card that needs to be rebalanced. Any ideas? How do you make a fixed One Ring?
Huh. I mean,
you gotta lose life faster, I think.
Start with a burden counter, like ETB burden counter with that. I mean, if you really want to fix it.
That's just drawing cards faster, too. I think you just powered it up, Seth.
Yeah.
I think
like
maybe
lose 2 life per burden counter?
2 life. One suggestion that I've seen from people is have the burden counters stick on you. So like an energy counter almost, so they don't go away once the One Ring goes away. So you have the permanent, almost like getting a Chandra emblem where you're permanently taking that damage, even if you legend rule it away or sack it or whatever. That could be interesting. What if it...
There's some weird angles. Like people are like, oh, what if you loop it? Or like, what if you stay long, you can recur this or bounce it or loop it or kill it. But I've never actually seen any of that happen. Like they just actually cast it, draw 4 cards and you're dead. So I think like dealing with the protection part, like not making it recurable or like not, keeping stuff around when the ring is removed doesn't help as much. You need to like nerf the raw power because the ring comes down, they just tap it 3 times, you're dead before they have to sack or bounce or anything, right?
Would taking the damage when you tap it solve anything rather than your upkeep? Like that would prevent like combos with it where you're like twiddle storming it off, but I guess it wouldn't really change much as far as playing it fairly. Would this card be good without the protection? Like what if that whole first paragraph didn't exist and it was just indestructible, draw a bunch of cards? Would that be good enough or would it be stone unplayable?
You would die. You would die, right? Because the thing here is like there's no downside outside of like Stomp and Questing Beast, like to like actually punish you for tapping out, right? Like this thing just gives you protection from everything. So I think that's the big thing. Like you can take the
Mind Sculptor. He didn't give you protection when he came down. He just came down and won the game. Yeah. Like you come down, you Solitude behind it. You're like, whatever. What's card? Like what is card efficiency? I don't need that, right? You Fury Solitude, play the One Ring, and call it a day, right?
I mean, this is like super Jace if that's the case.
Yeah, Jace was good. If you just give Jace a little power boost, I think he'd still be good. So I think even if you remove that protection, I mean, obviously it won't be like a free roll to cast it on 4, but you could have like a blocker or like a free spell and play it and then not need the protection and then just untap and win, right?
There would actually be some challenge to it then. Maybe I'm on the fence. Yeah. Like I think it would still see play in some decks, but I think it wouldn't be like it is now where like just any deck can throw it in and get value out of it. I kind of like the idea of losing 2 life per burden counter. One of the things players have realized is it works really well with Shieldred, and I will say it's like super annoying that you end up gaining life with Shieldred in the One Ring.
Yeah.
At least if it was 2 damage per burden counter, like Shieldred would just break you even instead of like actually putting you ahead as you draw the cards. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe if you just lost 2 life for each burden counter, maybe that would help.
What if it didn't lose you life, but all damage against you is doubled?
Ooh. Or what?
Would that help? Or what if like all the damage is infect or something, right? like what if we like shortened your lifespan somehow when you cast this?
Yeah, I mean,
that's the goal, right? Like behind the flavor and all of that. So yeah. It
just doesn't lose. It doesn't do it enough.
ETB? Yeah, lose half your life ETB with the damage.
Or like after 3 turns you lose the game or something. Like maybe there has to be something. I do like that. I do feel like they're going for the flavor of the ring and having there be a drawback to it, but the drawback just in practice is probably not quite enough.
It's like the Dark Confidant drawback, right? You're like, oh, you just lose life equal to the mana value. Like, actually, in reality, no one cares, right? So, like, that's kind of this one, right?
Yeah. You could literally put Dark Confidant drawback on it.
What if we bombed it? If you draw 3 cards, lose life equal to the mana value combined.
No. No.
That would make it way worse.
That'd be unplayable.
I think my favorite's just to try it with lose 2 life instead of lose 1 life. Like that's pretty. You change 1 number on the card and you keep it the same. I don't know if that'll be enough or not, but that's a like nice middle ground first step to try. All right, one last card. This one I guess is probably more for alchemy because I don't see it. I see it a little bit in historic, but that's a Troxa. Troxa Grand Unifier, ETBs, draws a ton of cards, blah, 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 blah. Question 1, does this even need fixing? And number 2, if it needs fixing, how do you fix it? Do you think a Troxa is a rebalanceable card?
What's wrong with it? Like, why does it need rebalancing? It's a 7 mana bomb that, you reanimate it, reloads your hand. My guess is the person who had the original post was probably thinking more of alchemy than historic, where Atraxa was really good in standard. There was a conversation before Fable got banned about like whether or not it could be a card that would get banned. So maybe from the perspective of like alchemy or more of a standard power level, I could see it being a card that people would want rebalanced. I don't see it enough in historic to actually care about it being rebalanced. Like there's just as scary things to reanimate. People are like Mizzix mastering and doing all these graveyard loops. So I'm not particularly scared of Atraxa in historic, but well, but then if we're talking about like alchemy, Fable's not legal there, right? It's also it is. Fable's still legal in alchemy.
The bannings didn't happen in alchemy, but alchemy will rotate in September. So those cards will leave in September because it'll have the rotation we would have had in standard. I don't know. If you want to fix Atraxa, maybe just make it so you can't blink it. Like, just make it so it's a cast trigger instead of ETB trigger.
I mean,
there's 2 ways to fix all these, right? It's always the cast trigger, the Eldrazi. So actually, you see it all in Eldrazi period, right? So the cast trigger or when it hits the graveyard, shuffle
it back in.
Those are the 2 ways Wizards has to prevent people from sneaking things into play. I think that we can actually sneak things directly into play. The cast trigger is probably the safest one. That's the newest one that they do. Do we need to? Like, what if we just remove lifelink or something from Atraxa? Is that good enough?
Well, I don't think we need to nerf this at all. You would nerf just like how it is in standard, right? Like think about it. Once Fable was gone, the enabler was gone. And then you never saw Atraxa again. Like every now and then you see a few Atraxa decks, sure, but like it's not even like that big of the meta anymore. Not just one where it's like Rakdos splashing Atraxa, all that, yada, yada, yada. So, I don't know. I just don't... I think this is fine. It's a 7-drop. Like, it has to do something good, right? So, like, I don't know. I don't see the problem with it.
What if you only see 9 cards instead of 10 cards? Would that do it?
You know what? Maybe that's it. Or 7. 7 because it's...
To go with all the
7s.
Yeah. I could... I kind of wish it was 7 mana.
7 might actually be a meaningful nerf. You got to kind of do the math, but 9 probably not it. But 7 might actually nerf like the number of cards you can get significantly.
You could cut down the number, but yeah, I mean, I guess I think I'm mostly with Krim, where I don't think personally I would say Atraxa needs to be rebalanced at this point. Although we'll see what the future looks like in standard and historic as things go along. Let's keep moving forward. Got a couple more quick topics. Actually, you mentioned standard, Krim. Have you played any standard since Lord of the Rings came out?
Yeah, a little bit on stream here and there.
How is the format? So I haven't played any standard since Lord of the Rings came out. I've been playing all modern and historic mostly. I'm curious, just looking at like the deck lists, it seems like black is still really, really dominant. And looking at the the metagame percentages of cards, like Sheoldred's still in like over 50% of decks. Black cards are still all over the place. We got another ban window coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, the beginning of August. You've played more than I have recently. Do you think anything else needs to change, considering there's no rotation in September? Or is standard healthy enough that just like let Eldraine release, go from there, we'll see what happens?
Just let Eldraine re-release here, or release. Because, I mean, right now, you've got like mono black, like, and black cards are just so good that, you know, like you would have to just rotate the entire color. If that were the case, right? Because it's got just so many good like things and threats at every step of the curve, so it's just efficient. But then the one main thing is now, Seth, what do you have to say about our Lord and Savior, Voidrent?
I see ya. Second most played deck in the format. Most of them have some Void Rens in there. So I think you're a prophet, Grim. You're just before your time. You've been playing Void Rens for like a year, but it's finally come to fruition.
And I've been playing Siphon Insights as well, and now that's all over the place. So you have Esper Control. I think that's the biggest thing. We mentioned it, right? Like before the bannings, there were just so many good threats that there wasn't like a control window where you could be like, oh, that resolves. That's fine. Everything had to get countered, right? Between Fable, yada, 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 like all these things. So now with those cards gone, control is actually like pulling up and now at the top of the meta, right? You have control. You've still got the Naya ramp deck. You've still got soldiers. You got mono black. You even have Dimir Tempo. Using double draw cards. Like we're talking like Fairy Mastermind, you've got Urtai. They kind of just like pretty much took Grixis and cut out the red, right? And I love that. I think that's pretty cool. This is looking like a sweet format. I think, maybe people don't like standard because that's just the nature of standard, right? It's always going to be a small card pool, like all of that. But like you have a Selesnya enchantments as well. Like I don't know. This is pretty dope, right?
I will say this looks like a format that you would love. I will give it that. Seeing all the control decks near the top of the meta, this looks like Crim's wheelhouse. I will say, I don't know about our Jace conversation from last week, seeing Esper and Blue-White at the top of the meta. This makes me more skeptical that Jace would be Jace the Mind Sculptor would be a safe card to actually add into standard with control already being so good.
Jace wouldn't be better than Wandering Emperor, would he? Wandering Emperor is like legitimately very good, right? Like that, like
it is.
But yeah, that's another thing, right? Like, but the thing here is there's a lot of decks right now. There's aggro, there's mid range, there's control. There's no combo, but that's fine. And then like Selesnya enchantments, that's whatever the hell you want to call that. So I don't know. I mean, is this not the makings of a good meta? Yeah, sure. Mid range is here, but that's just the nature of it when you have such strong cards in black, and everything nowadays isn't like a archetype supporter. It's just like there's no synergy. It's just a pile of good cards, and that's just how cards are today.
Yeah, I mean it looks like week 1 of standard. Like remember before Meatball was banned? Like this is what it looked like, right?
It's full circle.
Lily actually kind of sucked, right? But now that everyone's playing Esper Control, like Lily is actually very good. People are playing Lily now, right? But it's just like piles of mid-range stuff, and then you have the Dimir deck. I don't know. It feels the same still, except now Crim can play Control. So I am personally waiting for Eldraine. Like I thought we were done with Tenacious Underdog, Graveyard Trespasser.
No.
But like here we are, right? We've lost like what? Meatball Massacre. We've lost so many cards. Like the Invoke. Like you thought Invoke would be Mono Black's downfall because like that's kind of the deck that like always ran it, but like it didn't matter, right? Like losing Fable on the other side like boosted Mono Black. So I don't know that there's a point to any of this. Like it's like when you have a bunch of Jund cards, you just ban like the first best one, but that first best one was like 1% better than the next one. So like it didn't actually effectively do anything, right? Yeah. And if that one card happened to prop up a color, then that color goes, which is basically the story of Fable. But you still have like 10 other cards at 98% sitting there. And then I was just talking to Seth, like, maybe Standard is really good, but who has time to play Standard? I'm busy with Lord of the Rings, right? I'm busy with Commander Masters. Like, I still have like 8,000 legendaries to build from Lord of the Rings, let alone whatever Commander Masters is pooping out right now, right? Like, who has time to deal with this? Like, why go play this old format and try to have fun with it when there are all these shiny new cards to look at? And then, of course, by the time Eldraine comes around, they'll probably have shown us the next Commander product, and then we'll probably we're like, oh, have you seen the Commander cards in Eldraine? They're insane, right? I gotta go build my Commander decks. Like I'll leave Standard for later, right? So yeah, this marketing isn't doing Standard any favors.
I mean, the Lord of the Rings set was a saving grace this summer, I think. It actually ended up being super fun. At least my experience has been. It's been super fun to play with in Historic and in Modern. So I'm kind of fine with Standard being whatever right now, because like even if Standard is really good, I would probably still be playing Lord of the Rings cards in these other formats because I've just been having so much fun playing them. So I think it kind of worked out. I am still a little sad that we're not rotating in September, but we'll see. Maybe Eldraine will shake up the format. I got one other topic, and then we can get to fish mail. So there's been some Nazgul conspiracies floating around recently. People seem convinced that Nazguls are somehow more rare than the rest of the uncommons in the set. If you look on Reddit, you look on social media, there's people posting about like, oh, I opened, a couple boxes and I only got one Nazgul, or I got no Nazguls, but I got 3 Rosies. Like, there's a lot of conspiracies about this. Richard, think there's any truth to this? These rumors do you remember like, wow, this is Ether Revolt era. Do you remember the Fatal Push is a mythic uncommon and like all this stuff, and people would open boxes and it was a big thing? Is there any possibility that these conspiracies could be true, or are people just really bad at math, even though we all play a very mathy, probabilistic game?
Now we know why most people aren't tournament grinders. I don't know. This is like, put it up there with the Arena Shuffler's Ring. Like, what incentive does Wizards have to do this, right? Like, why would they do this? What is the payoff? And, for what reason, right? And, maybe it actually is true, but you certainly aren't going to find it as Joe Schmo opening like 1 box or 2 boxes, right? Like, if Star City Games, open all their singles, they're like, wait a minute, guys, there seems to be an issue. Then I might put some merit into it, right? But opening 1 box, going on Reddit, and then putting a thread up, and then another person on Reddit seeing that thread with their 1 box, adding to it, like, does not really count for like real data, right? It's biased data. So yeah, put it up with Moto Shuffler's bugged, Arena Shuffler's bugged. Worth is handling my cards at the GP and giving me only lands if I win it in. Like, I don't know, right? Like,
I will say, so I do think part of it's grounded in just a misunderstanding about how the card is being distributed. So it's from everything I have been able to find out about this set, the Nazgul as a card is the same rarity as every other uncommon. So you will get a Nazgul the same rate as Rosie, name an uncommon in the set, Peregrine Took, doesn't matter. So the rate is the same. The thing that throws people off is there's 9 Nazguls. That's kind of the issue with it. So if you open a box of Lord of the Rings, you'll get about 1, just over 1 of every uncommon on average. That means you'll get a single Nazgul. The problem is there's 9 Nazguls and people want all of them. So any individual Nazgul, like Nazgul 332 or Nazgul 333, those are actually pretty rare. If you consider, if you open a box, it takes about 2 boxes to get every rare. It takes about 4 or 5 to get every mythic. To get every Nazgul, 1 of each of the 9, it's almost 8 boxes. So any individual one is actually almost twice as rare as a mythic, but getting a Nazgul is the same rate as any uncommon. So I think that's part of what's throwing people off, is people don't just want a Nazgul, they want these specific ones. You want 1 of each art to like make your deck be flavorful or whatever. So I think that's a lot of what people are missing. So yeah, in some sense, any specific Nazgul is actually very, very rare than a mythic, but just getting a Nazgul should be exactly the same as uncommon. And I haven't seen anything that would make me doubt that that's the truth. So I think it is kind of a case of maybe like not great communication about how they're actually distributed, combined with us just not being very good at math.
So you're saying there's only 1 Nazgul on the sheet, right?
There's one Nazgul on the sheet.
Say there was 2 uncommons in the set, Rosie and Nazgul. Instead of like 9 Nazguls and 1 Rosie being on the sheet,
you'll get 1 of each.
Actually 1 Nazgul and 1 Rosie, and that
yes.
1 Nazgul is 1 of 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or else Nazguls would actually be way less rare than other uncommons. Like if all of them were on the same sheet, then they would show
I think
up way more often.
They would all be
1
in the same
pack
sheet,
could be like double Nazgul.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think the
that's...
thing is people just can't compute the price, right? You're like, why is this? Uncommons are free
right.
in most
yes.
people's minds, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that it's worth something, like, just simply does not compute to people, right? And it causes confusion.
I mean, Sensei's Divining Top was uncommon. Just remember that.
I will say, I think in the
That was
future, the
everywhere.
lesson might be, if you're going to break the 4 of rule, put the card at common if possible. Maybe it would have broke limited to have Nazgul at uncommon. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I
I don't
think in
know if
general,
you could
like,
have that at common.
Dragon's Approach, Rat Colony, Seven Dwarfs, those are all commons, right? And they end up being worth a couple bucks, but not like super expensive. Hopefully we never get a rare version. Oh God. Oh, Wizards, the Scrooge McDuck jumping into the swimming pool of money. Could you imagine like a mythic that you could play any number of?
Like if it was a rare, like it has to have some crack to, like, imagine it's like Prosper, but you can have like 9 of them in your deck. And you're
God.
like, what?
Whew, yeah, that's scary. Anyway, I think those are all of our topics for today. But Richard, we got a couple minutes, so why don't you fishmail us?
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MGGoldfish with the hashtag MGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Only way, is the One Ring more powerful than Necropotence or Yawgmoth's Bargain?
Yes.
Yawg's Bargain is 6 mana.
It does just
This
draw your
is-
deck,
right?
basically.
Did it mean
It draws
Will?
your
Yeah.
whole deck.
No,
Wait,
yeah.
wait, does it draw
Yawgmoth's
your-
Bargain is also banned. It's just like 6 mana, pay life, draw a card.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, like I think it's better than both.
I
I
think,
think it's better than both because it's universal. It can be applied in any deck.
Yep.
And the protection is huge, right? Like that's just a get out of jail free card for 1 turn and draws you a silly amount.
I think it depends slightly on the deck. There are going to be decks that would prefer just like a Storm deck would probably prefer Yawgmoth's Bargain just because it wants to draw all the cards at once rather than over the course of a few turns. But for me, like being colorless is the huge tiebreaker. Like Necro's triple black. That's a real cost. That's a mana cost. So being colorless, I think, is a huge, huge swing in One Ring's favor. What do you think, Richard?
I think it's more powerful across the power level spectrum, right? Like at a casual table, Necro like does nothing. Like you just Necro into like bad cards and die. Whereas the One Ring is going to do a lot of work. At the very high end though, like isn't Necro better because it's just faster, right? It's like 1 turn faster. You get all your cards immediately. You can just combo. Like, are you trying to grind people out at the highest levels with One Ring? I'm not sure. We'd have to actually take a look. But my intuition is Necro is probably better because it's burstier. But you know, when we're talking about casual commander, casual kitchen table, all of that, like the One Ring like dusts all these cards. So I think, and then the fact that it goes in every single deck, you don't need to build around it. Like Necro, you have to build a very specific type of deck. So I think the One Ring is more powerful if you look at it holistically. Ron Bolofsky, we were discussing an idea for every 15 extra cards you add to your deck, you can add another copy of a card. Yorion comes to mind. So that means I think if you have a 75 card deck, you can play 5 of a card. Is that what they're hinting at here?
That's what it sounds like. Wouldn't that just break Battleouts? How many Battleouts could I play if I had 250 cards? Wait a minute.
Is this what we care about? Battlewits?
That's what I care about.
I'm thinking about like imagine how much more consistent that would make 1 card appear, and like that. Let's
Would it
just
though?
imagine.
You just added 15 more cards.
I guess.
I guess so when what Yorion tells us, those 15 cards are like actually preordains and serum visions, right? So,
Yeah.
And then the 5th card gets you more redundancy, so maybe it actually
we
gets
can definitely, yeah, like we could probably make it pretty consistent, right? I mean, imagine if it were just, I don't know, Oko. You could just consistently find Oko always, right? Like that. There's going to be metas where every 15 cards means the worst card in the meta that you're tired of playing against is going to more likely show up. So,
But think what it'll do to Mill.
Why would we?
Play Mill.
What's the upside of any of this? Like, I get it for Yarion or Battleouts, but why? Why would we
So you
want
don't
to
have cut cards out
incentivize
of your deck anymore?
yeah.
No, so
Imagine I
just,
can
like,
build my commander deck and
convenience.
just saunter in with a 150 card deck. I'm like, I didn't want to. Like when I build Commander Clash decks, it takes me like 15 minutes to build a deck, and then anywhere from like 15 minutes to 3 hours cutting it back down to the right size. And if you gave me this rule, I would just walk in.
Just play
I
them
do this
all.
all time limited. I'm like 42 card special limited, baby. 41 cards. I wanted 16.5 land. It's this is exactly what I wanted, right? But it just lets lazy people get away with it.
I love that you know it's wrong enough that you have justifications in your mind to write. I'm like, 16 and a half. This is a 16 and a half land deck.
Do I play 16 or 17 lands? We'll just add the 41st card and I'll fix it all, right?
That'll take care of it.
Don't do that, by the way. This is a terrible idea, but
But hey,
we gotta cope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I
don't
play
like
the
it.
61 card special all the time in 60 card formats. And let me tell you, the internet yells at me all the time.
You just gotta squeeze
I
in
want
one
to go
less
to a
void
Magic
rend.
Fest and get deck checked, and my deck is like 2,000 cards. Like, can I get your deck list? You bring out like a CVS receipt. You're like, here you go.
Have fun.
Read
Have
'em.
fun with that.
All right. Thank you to everyone who sent in fish mail this week. If you have questions in the future, you can send them to @MTGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 402 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard Cribb, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have a spectacular week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.